My friends, look at the level of the reconfiguration of forces that is being set up behind the scenes of global power, and that regular journalism simply can't see out of sheer technical incompetence. The approval of Section 224 of the United States National Defense Authorization Act has started the construction of an unprecedented and violent military architecture between the Pentagon and Israel. This is not a facade diplomatic treaty or a public statement of support for the press to consume. We are witnessing the birth of a strategic interoperability ecosystem that merges the sensors, satellites, ships, and combat computers of the two most sophisticated forces on the planet. And the impact of this on the ports, command rooms, and launch silos throughout the Middle East is terminal. Imagine two steel swords that once fought separately on the same battlefield and have now been melted down and forged into a single blade. Indestructible, guided by an invisible cybernetic mind. It's the transformation of two war machines into a single organism of electronic predation. And from this moment on, any threat that crosses the skies is tracked and distributed by an automated electronic circuit that eliminates human hesitation time. The strategic mistake of the adversaries was to think that the West would respond with backroom diplomacy. The new order is strangulation through data processing. We're not talking about a paper political union, but about a technologically integrated military ecosystem capable of raising operational efficiency to the maximum limit. To grasp the magnitude of this union shock, we must look behind the curtain of time. But before that, subscribe to the channel, activate the notification bell, and leave a like for the shock. What a union, but one more. The axis of dictatorships has spent the last 4 decades stitching together a meticulous plan to suffocate and destroy the West. And they were ahead in this game. Iran set up a macabre web of militias and terrorist groups spread throughout the Middle East, keeping the entire region hostage, in fear and under constant destabilization. Tehran's hidden goal has always been geopolitical. To manipulate the gears of the international market to keep the price of oil under China's absolute control. Cheap and abundant for Beijing's factories, but expensive and suffocating for the rest of the world. While Iran operated chaos in the desert, China was building its navy at a frightening speed, launching gigantic warships into the sea at the same pace as printing paper in an industrial print shop. At the same time, Russia was extending its claws toward Europe, and even though it failed in its advance, Moscow turned the conflict into a school of tyranny, using North Korean soldiers in the trenches and Chinese officers in the command centers to put into practice all the tactics of attrition against the West. And here, in Latin America, the infiltration was silent and deep. Islamic radicalism, the Chinese Communist Party, and the old Russian Soviet shadow infiltrated the institutions of each country, draining local wealth and instilling a systematic sense of anti-Americanism and anti-Semitism. The damage was so severe that the largest nations in the region, such as Brazil, Colombia, and even Venezuela, recently broke their historic diplomatic ties with Israel. My friends, the siege seemed complete. But when the United States and Israel decided to join forces and integrate their defense codes, the world was absolutely shocked by the speed and boldness of their response. The dictators in power found out, in the worst way, that the rules of the game had changed. Never in military history had tyrannical leaders become the first targets. Israel, through precise work in signals intelligence and human infiltration, located and took down the historic commanders who haunted the Middle East and terrorized the planet. They were eliminated directly in their maximum security bunkers. The combination of these technological powers left Xi Jinping in a panic in Beijing and Vladimir Putin desperate in Moscow. They realized that their asymmetric saturation strategy of firing thousands of missiles and drones at the same time to overwhelm Western computers lost their effectiveness against an automated network. And this new reality made Kim Jong-un in North Korea sink into deep paranoia. Afraid of being the next target on the elimination list, he rushed to increase his nuclear power and shout to the world, trying to prove that he can bite too. But the message had already been sent. Democracy and freedom now have sharp teeth and an even more powerful strategy. Look at the technical complexity of this multi-layered defense system and the damage it causes to the enemy general's planning. The naval component of this new architecture relies on one of the Pentagon's most feared assets, the destroyers equipped with the Aegis system. These vessels are not just patrol ships at sea. They function as mobile electronic fortresses positioned in the Mediterranean, the Gulf, and on the planet's strategic routes. The Arleigh Burke class with the Aegis system is equipped with integrated scanning radar systems that can track hundreds of targets simultaneously from the horizon line to the edge of outer space. It is on these ships that the SM-3 and SM-6 interceptor missiles are installed. The SM-3 is a pure kinetic killer. It was designed to go beyond Earth's atmosphere, hunting intercontinental ballistic missiles in the vacuum of space. It doesn't have a traditional explosive warhead. It destroys the target through the brutal impact of a hypersonic collision. At the same time, the SM-6 missile operates in the lower layer, intercepting fighter jets, cruise missiles that fly close to the sea, and next-generation hypersonic threats. The fact is that these ships lock down the airspace long before any enemy projectile can reach the mainland. Section 2. 124 takes all this American naval intelligence and connects it directly to the command centers on land, eliminating any blind spots on the defense map. And when the threat advances toward the continent, the ecosystem activates its land-based high-altitude barrier. The United States operates the THAAD system, which stands for Terminal High Altitude Area Defense. It is a mobile platform with long-range radars capable of detecting rocket launches from thousands of kilometers away. On Israeli soil, the front line is defended by the RO-2 and RO-3 platforms, developed especially to contain the fury of Iran's ballistic missiles. Think about how the RO-3 works. It is the pinnacle of aerospace engineering. This system is capable of exo-atmospheric interception, which means it destroys the enemy warhead in deep space. This prevents nuclear debris, chemicals, or heavy metal fragments from falling on cities and polluting the atmosphere. The central problem of contemporary warfare is that the American THAAD and the Israeli Arrow operated on isolated software frequencies. They didn't talk to each other, they didn't communicate, they weren't friends. But if the THAAD's radar detected the launch from Tehran first, the system took seconds to encode and activate that route for the Arrow's computers. The saturation gap occurred. When a ballistic missile travels at Mach 23, advancing more than 800 meters per second, the generals don't have time to call cabinet meetings. The digital fusion of the new law unifies these electronic brains. The two systems start firing as if they were triggered by the same switch, and below outer space, aerial warfare turns into saturated chaos. And that's where the American Patriot PAC-3 and the Israeli David Sling come in, supported by the Iron Dome in the short-range barrier against rockets and artillery drones. When a wave of attacks simultaneously involves dozens of fighter jets, planes, refueling tankers, electronic intelligence aircraft, and AWACS airborne warning platforms, the greatest danger isn't enemy firepower, it's the risk of deconfliction failure. Conflict error is the critical and computerized process of putting all aircraft and air defense systems on the same page, knowing exactly where each allied vector is and where it is going. I want to give you a practical example of when this isn't synchronized. Look, American allies have shot down United States fighters now in the war against Iran. I know, my friends, what a loss. And without absolute technological standardization, the system becomes blind and the result is friendly fire. It was due to glaring conflict failures that Russia shot down its own fighters over Ukraine. Section 224 solves this bottleneck at the root. That's what I'm talking about. There is a secure and automatic transmission line where air mission orders and traffic data are instantly shared between the United States and Israel. The American Patriot and David Sling no longer operate on parallel channels. They divide the targets mathematically, ensuring that no Allied missile intercepts the same projectile or causes an internal tragedy due to radio communication failure. And if you think all this engineering mobilization is just about blowing up metal in the sky, you still haven't seen the real brain of the system, artificial intelligence and the technological suffocation of dictatorships. The amount of data generated simultaneously by reconnaissance satellites and infrared sensors has surpassed the biological capacity of human analysis. The military software analyzes the target inventory, identifies which signals are electronic decoys, and dictates the ideal proposal for the launchers, so the operator doesn't have to hesitate. But this supremacy of hardware and data runs up against a silicon prison that the Eastern Bloc cannot break. The heart of modern technology is not made of raw minerals, it's made of semiconductor processing. Due to direct pressure from Washington, China and Iran have been blocked from accessing the extreme ultraviolet lithography machines from the Dutch company ASML. The only monopoly on the planet capable of printing the next generation chips that power cutting-edge artificial intelligence networks. While the West operates with an abundance of advanced NVIDIA processors, the Eastern Bloc tries to squeeze blood from a stone with outdated or smuggled hardware. They manage to run efficient software despite the scarcity. But they are doomed to be technological followers, dependent on espionage and always one step behind in the intelligence race. My friends, let's talk now about the Spike NLNLOS missile. The digitalized military alliance is not limited to the strategic defense of the skies and oceans. It goes down to the mud of the battlefield and transforms tactical combat through outright technology sharing. The ultimate symbol of this surgical offensive is known as Spike. Yes, my friends, it's an acronym for non-line of sight. It's a high-precision guided missile, originally developed by Israel, and the American Army started integrating it directly into their Apache attack helicopters and armored vehicles operating in Europe. The Spike NLOS breaks the laws of traditional physics. It allows the operator to fire at a target located kilometers away, completely hidden behind a mountain, a building, or an enemy fortification. The missile flies while transmitting real-time video images through a fiber optic cable or data link. The soldier in the Apache helicopter cockpit can see exactly what the missile is seeing during flight, correcting its trajectory in the air and choosing which bunker window he wants to blow up without having to expose the aircraft to enemy anti-aircraft artillery fire. It's the elimination of danger by remote control. The integration of this missile into the American fleet turns the firepower of helicopters into a strategic demolition tool for high-value targets. And while the Spike missile destroys enemy defenses in the attack, Western heavy armored vehicles have received electronic armor that neutralize the main weapon of Iran's militias. The Pentagon installed the TROF active protection system created in Israel on its fleet of M1 Abrams heavy battle tanks positioned on the front lines in Europe. This system works in practice like a portable iron dome attached to the sides of the armored vehicle. Militias in the Middle East and Russian soldiers will spend decades relying on guided anti-tank missiles and rocket launchers to immobilize armored forces. The TROF destroyed that strategy. The system uses computerized mini radars spread across the body of the M1 Abrams tank to monitor the area in 360 degrees. When an enemy projectile is fired at the vehicle, the computer calculates the speed and trajectory of the threat in microseconds. Instead of waiting for the impact on the armor, the TROF system activates a mechanism that fires a surgical cloud of metal spheres which implodes the rocket in the air. Meters away from the tank, yes, the pilots pass through here. The vehicle moves forward unharmed in the middle of enemy fire. This industrial symbiosis shows the perfect fusion. Israel brings in the genius of the combat laboratory, and the United States brings in massive manufacturing scale to armor their divisions. And the interoperability of this alliance goes down to the most basic and vital details of a soldier's survival on the factory floor of war. The military engineering of the Bloc realized that the speed to stop bleeding in the middle of a firefight determines who comes back home alive. That's how the United States Armed Forces massively adopted the so-called Israeli emergency bandage, a relatively revolutionary pressure dressing that changed first aid protocols in combat. Unlike traditional gauzes, which require 2 soldiers to perform the procedure under fire, the Israeli bandage was designed with a built-in pressure bar in a mechanical setup that allows the wounded soldier to apply the dressing tightly using only one hand right in the middle of combat. Guys, did this come from Israel? It applies intense pressure to the bleeding site, working almost like an instant surgical tourniquet that prevents shock from blood loss on the battlefield. It seems like a simple detail, doesn't it? All of this in front of Missile State or Destroyers Alert Aliberg, but it's the ultimate proof of how symbiosis works. Standardization doesn't leave any loose ends. It protects everything from the steel of the satellite to the fabric of the infantryman's uniform in the trench. The question that plagues armchair analysts is how this alliance works without each state losing its independence. The model that governs this function is inspired by NATO's own surgical standardization. In the Atlantic Alliance, 32 independent countries strictly use the same 5.56 ammunition cartridges and the same radiophonetic alphabet, alpha, gamma, beta, and so on. But each nation stands tall.
Gama, beta e por aí vai, mas cada nação
Their sovereign chain of command, their generals, and their foreign policy objectives remain intact. Coordination is what mature forces do when they know the battlefield requires total conflict. Section 2, 124 does not create a supranational command where American generals obey foreign orders or vice versa. No, my friends, that's not what the alliance is about. Don't fall for that lie. Each country continues to control its own armed forces and set its own foreign policy guidelines. The symbiosis exists so that at the moment of launch, the computers operate in a coordinated way. It is the consolidation of a structure where sovereignty is protected through mutual technological efficiency. The adversaries do not face a political annexation, but rather a mechanical synchrony that multiplies the destructive power of each installed battery. And the plain truth is that the time for slow decisions is over, and engineering has imposed a physical limit on the bluffing of dictatorships. Either the electronic isolation that Session 224 imposes against the Tehran Bloc and its Asian partners cannot be circumvented by speeches or ideological propaganda. If this unified digital network fails for even a single minute, the vacuum creates room for tactical vulnerability on the global chessboard. Code-level fusion is the bitter remedy that removes analog intermediaries and automates the sanitization of airspace. When the radar signal is integrated, the swarm strategy loses its efficiency. And in the face of all this geopolitical autopsy, I ask you a surgical question to measure your level of perception about the real game of power. Is this new digital fusion between the United States and Israel a pure strategic move to consolidate Western sovereignty, or is it a symptom of technical desperation in the face of Iran's new weapons? You can comment here. If you see the maneuver as a deliberate control plan, write the word strategy in the comments. But if you think the system acted out of pure survival urgency, comment the word desperation. I want to see your analysis. And I want to ask one more question here. It bothers the fans, those orphan children of the Soviet Union, of the Chinese Communist Party, those supporters of the Ayatollahs. I want to ask you now, looking into your eyes, do you believe that China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, who else will be able to achieve this level of technological integration? My answer is no, my friends. They won't be able to reach that level. They won't. It's not possible. Not now and not even in 100 years, because in the end,
They hate each other.
But the truth is, my friends, you can't rely on the platforms controlled by the system to understand the real game of who moves the pieces of global power. If you want to have access to surgical depth without censorship, without filters, and without that lukewarm, manipulated narrative they try to force into your head every day through the mainstream media, you need to be part of our bunker. Use the QR code that appears on your screen right now. Click the link that's pinned in the first comment of the video and in the description. There are more than 3,000 elite analysts who fund the real information that we bring here for you. And there, it's an uncensored environment where we can name names without worrying about a single decision taking our program off the air. I always say this here, we're on rented ground, aren't we? And for you who like movies and series, look, I believe I've solved a big problem in your life. That problem of spending 1 or 2 hours just to pick a good movie to watch with your family, without all that junk that globalism tries to put into the stories. Everything is filtered so you can just sit on the couch and watch. So check out the tips we bring every day, every week, including recommending amazing series. Falda, which talks about Israeli intelligence in the Middle East, infiltrated inside Hezbollah, inside Hamas. We also have the series Tehran, set in Iran. The Mossad, the Israeli secret service, infiltrated right under the Ayatollah's noses. We're also recommending the series Homeland. The CIA, yes, the CIA infiltrated inside Iran. And now a tough series. It has nothing to do with the Middle East, but it does have to do with the breakdown of woke culture. They're tearing up the globalist manuals in this series. All of that on this channel. So the link is in the description, in the first pinned comment, and also here in the card that will appear on your screen. Now, the best part of this video, I'll confess to you, this was one of the best videos I've ever recorded because all of this is really cool, isn't it? Look, now subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and leave your like on the video. There are already more than 300,000 of us in this community. Yes, thanks to you who follow me and share this video. Now shield your mind. I'm Shimon Oliveira, and I'll see you in the next video. See you there.